Okay, time for the politics edition of the Improbability Engine. I'm Will Aubrey. My buddy Joe Darnell is here. And what's on your mind this week, Joe?
Survival, Will. Just trying to make it at this point. A lot of stuff going on. A lot of stuff that's pretty negative. There's a Kentucky Senate bill being pushed forward that would gut the minimum wage law, would change how minimum wages are applied and how they're done, would take the $2.13 an hour that servers make, for example, which is already ludicrous.
Yes.
Servers only make $2.13 an hour. They rely on tips to get to minimum wage. That's already a giveaway to restaurant owners. Let's just call that what it is. But what they're saying now is that the restaurant owners would not have to pay the $2.13 if the tips were to go to cover that first. So that means that any tips that they would make first would have to make up the entire minimum wage.
And they want to do away with the minimum wage, and this new bill does away with the state minimum wage.
Right.
Now, whether that would... What effect that would have is debatable because there is a federal minimum wage law, and we would just have to see what effect that would have. But make no mistake, the Republicans want to do away with the federal minimum wage law too.
Absolutely.
And if you ask them, well, what do you think the minimum wage should be? They'll tell you it should be whatever the market sets it at. They won't give you a number.
No.
And the truth is, they want it to be as low as possible. If businesses can get people to work for 50 cents an hour, that's what the Republicans want. It's obscene. It will destroy the state if they do that. It'll destroy the country if they do that. And it will take us back to a time when, people were working 16-hour days, 6-7 days a week. Children were working. And they also, by the way, have worked to roll back child labor laws because they want children to work. And the bill that you were talking about, it does away with any kind of minimum wage for, or actually allows the people to pay teenagers less than the federal minimum wage, I think is how it is structured.
Right.
Builds
an exception.
Yes. Makes an exception for teenagers so that you can pay them less. And let's be clear, number one, what will that lead businesses to do? It will lead them to hire teenagers instead of other people because they can pay them less.
Absolutely.
So it will lead to greater unemployment among people who are not teenagers.
Right.
And it amounts to making teenagers slave labor.
Well, I posted this on Facebook not too long ago because it struck me. The argument being made by Republicans is that these are all pro-business changes. These are for business. This is to encourage business. This is going to help business. And I got to ask this question. If you've got a business that can't, I don't know, not destroy the environment or not pay people a fair wage, why are we fighting for that business?
Yeah, who cares?
Because that tells me that business is not, the market has said it doesn't make enough money.
Yeah.
It doesn't make enough money because these are the standards you have to pass in order to play in the playground. America is the most prosperous country in the world, and it's not close. The problem is it is weighted very heavily to the very top. That prosperity hits there on the idea that it'll trickle down, and I'm still waiting for the trickle down.
And let's be clear here. There are other things in this bill, like, for example, it gives employers the right to deduct money from your check if they think that your work is substandard.
Or if you lose or damage tools, or if something gets stolen while you're in charge of it.
But executives are exempted from those provisions.
Of course they are. Why wouldn't they be? God forbid they actually hold somebody else accountable for that. This is what we've been talking about this entire time, Will. When we talk about the Republicans being anti-working person, this is exactly what we're talking about. This is the very crux of all we're doing. And the further that this bill goes tells us how much against it people who actually work for a living are.
Now, it's like the right to work legislation.
Absolutely.
And Bevan talks about how that will bring businesses to the state of Kentucky. Okay? Ask yourself, if you don't understand the whole right to work controversy, ask yourself why that will bring businesses to the state of Kentucky. And the answer is they will be able to pay lower wages.
Yeah.
What right to work laws are is right to work for less.
They really are. And what's really sad about this whole thing is that it's the very thing that Republicans have criticized the Obama administration for. When the Obama administration would roll out, hey, we've created this many hundreds of thousands of jobs. This is the second month or the 10th month or the 12th month or the 30th month in a row that we've made this many jobs. The argument was always, yes, but they're Mick jobs, they're Walmart jobs, they're jobs that pay minimum wage. The actual wage hasn't gone up, hasn't, kept pace. Yes, you're creating these low-paying jobs. You have to create all these jobs. Everybody has to have 3 to survive. That was the argument made by Republicans during the Obama administration. And to an extent, I can agree with that. They were relatively low-paying jobs. We weren't seeing wage increases like we had hoped to see on an upswing, hiring environment. But this is where the Republicans show their true colors, because they don't care if you make more money or have enough money to pay, your rent or your light bill or to feed your kids or anything. They don't care because you don't matter. All they want is your vote, and then they want you to go to work and make your $2.10 an hour and take on your second job, and that's all they care about. As long as the businesses are profitable, they don't care.
I was talking to a friend of mine who is a college professor at City University of New York. And she was telling me about cuts that they were having there and how they were closing universities in Pennsylvania and in Kansas, and they were having cutbacks there. And I told her that there was the potential for closings in Illinois, that I'd read that SIU Carbondale might possibly close. In Eastern Illinois, there was some question about whether or not it was going to close. Meanwhile, here in Kentucky, they're going to performance-based funding, which is insane. We've already seen how this kind of thing works with our schools, where they base the funding on the test scores that students make.
Right.
They want to base the funding of universities on the number of degrees that the university gives out.
Because nothing can go wrong with that, right?
And the number of degrees in fields where they can go to work immediately.
You know what's really, really disturbing about that? I went to school at Murray State and I got a degree in history. I got a degree in BIS with emphasis in history. But one of the things that I just noticed is the most recent hiring by the Trump administration for the National Security Advisor post was by a man who had been in the military and had gotten a degree in history. And I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. I mean, for all the criticisms of the Trump administration that I have, and there are many, I at least applaud the fact that the guy who's going to be his national security advisor now has a background in history that would give him the ability to critically think about some different situations. But then I saw something else. Elon Musk came out. Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, 2 of the most cutting-edge companies in the United States currently, came out and said that the fields in which people need to be working are not in tech-related fields. They don't need to be writing code. They don't need to be doing that. They need to focus on critical thinking and creative thinking, which is the very nature of what liberal arts educations give, is the ability to take disparate ideas and find how they're connected. That interrelation, the relationship between things that don't seem related. That's the very nature of a liberal arts education. You have to have an understanding of all these different areas, at least a basic understanding of all of those areas, in order to make the correct connections. Those are the areas that he says need to be emphasis. That needs to be our emphasis, is growing those liberal arts fields, is going into those areas that can create creative thinkers and can create, problem solvers. And that's the area that we're cutting right now.
That's absolutely true. And putting the emphasis on the number of degrees that you give out.
It's asinine.
It's completely because you know that the universities will game the system. They'll make it easier to get degrees is what they'll do. People will learn less. They will be less prepared, but they'll have a degree. It's crazy.
I think the thing that's the most disturbing about the whole thing is that for all the talk of Republicans about delicate snowflakes and so on and so forth and participation trophies, that's what they're going to make the education system turn into. Well, hey, you showed up. That's good enough. Well, you didn't show up every day, but you showed up some days. Hey, we know your name. Here's your diploma.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what's going to happen. And don't think that it's only going to happen in the universities and colleges. It's going to happen in the high schools as well, because performance-based funding tells people, okay, let's teach to the test. That's the one thing that I've heard Republicans talk about with Common Core since it became kind of talked about. They're teaching to the test. You're just going to teach to the test. No. They're teaching to whatever the standard is that you're setting forth. That's been done since education began.
Yeah, it's the No Child Left Behind thing that has them teaching to the test.
Absolutely. And
that's a Republican plan.
Yeah, exactly. It absolutely is. And what's more, the Common Core thing, they talk about it being a federal regulation when it's absolutely not. It is a group of states who've come together and based on this stuff together.
And it was the National Governors Association that did that, which is, guess what, run by Republicans.
Right, exactly. I actually, one of the guys I know is a retired lieutenant general from the Marine Corps, and we had spoken about education one time, and specifically about Common Core, and he told me something that kind of set my skin on edge. He said to me, he's like, the problem that people don't seem to get when we keep screwing with education and not making it where we're teaching these kids anything, every single day, the technology in the defense sector goes up. Every single day we don't improve our education of our students is a day that we have a military force that cannot use the tools the military needs to be successful. You've got a bunch of people who might want to join the military who cannot mentally hack it. That is the scariest thing I've ever heard, I think, because in World War II, at the very beginning of the war, the U.S. government was shocked at how few of the 18-year-old recruits they got were physically capable of being soldiers. They were malnourished. They were a product of the Depression. They were had stunted growth in a lot of cases. They had poor oral hygiene. They were physically incapable of doing what was needed at the time whenever the national defense called upon them. But those things can be fixed. You can give good nourishment to somebody who's malnourished. How do you do that from an intellectual standpoint? How do you go back and fix 20 years of negligent education by the time you need to have capable soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines? How do you go back and fix that? And the answer is you can't. You cannot bridge that gap. It cannot be done. And so that's something I had never thought about. And it's an issue that we've got to be serious about, because frankly, what else in the hell are we fighting for?
Here's another educational issue that we need to be serious about that we are ignoring. When I was in college in the 70s, about 55% of college students were male.
Yeah.
45% female.
Yeah.
Today, over 60% of college students are female.
Mm-hmm.
2/3 of advanced degrees are awarded to women.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Yay for them. They're
Mm-hmm.
doing a great job. The problem is men, for some reason, are dropping out
Mm-hmm.
and not finishing school, and that can't be good for the country.
Well, the big thing you want to see is whatever the ratios of men to women are of the 18-year-old demographic.
That's what it should be.
That's what it should be. That for the next 4 years, those group of people should be
I
graduating.
guarantee you, 2/3 of 18 to 22-year-olds are not female.
No, the issue that you're seeing here is that there are groups of students that don't see the value in going to college. They just don't. They see the massive amounts of student debt. They see low wages and difficulty finding a job afterwards. And they see a lifetime of forever making less money than if they'd never gone to college. Now, this is the exact opposite of what has been promised this entire time. I mean, whenever we talk about jobs in America, the United States has led the way because we've had a nation of educated, innovative people. My great uncle-in-law was a farm boy from West Tennessee. He went and got a job up in Michigan working for General Motors, and General Motors saw fit to put him in their engineering program. Now, this is an employee college that General Motors ran. He came out as an engineer. Now, this is where education's important. You're talking about a kid who had rudimentary education in rural Tennessee, moves to Michigan and works for GM. Not only does that, he works his way up from line worker and becomes an executive vice president at GM by the time he retires. Now, this is a guy who absolutely understands the value of education. We don't have that anymore because there's no advancement. There's no progression. There's no movement in the upper echelon of wage earners. It doesn't happen. The American dream, for all intents and purposes, and it pains me to say this, is dead. It's just that. It's a dream. It's a fantasy. It isn't real anymore.
Well, I think it's George Carlin who said they call it the American dream because you have to be dreaming to believe it. The American dream was founded on two things. Unions, which produced good jobs with good wages.
Allowed middle class to happen, and those middle class could send their kids to get the education that they never received, right?
And the GI Bill, which allowed men to go to college after their time in the military.
Right.
Now,
both of these things were huge in the development of the United States.
They're responsible for the middle class.
Absolutely.
Now, over the last 30 years, Republicans have done everything they can to destroy unions. In the 1970s, 40% of workers in this country belonged to a union. Today, it's 12%.
Yep.
That's why wages aren't going up.
Well, wages have been stagnant for decades. Not like years.
Yeah,
Not like where
decades.
you can say, well, it's just the Obama administration, or it's the George W. Bush administration, or it's the Bill Clinton administration, or it's the George H.W. Bush administration.
They've been stagnant since the Reagan administration.
Absolutely. And you can see the effect of cutting out the legs of unions as a way of inhibiting the advancement of people to work. I mean...
And then, the other thing now, the GI Bill, my son was in the Army, and his education was paid for to a certain extent by the Army after he got out. Mm-hmm. But colleges have become so expensive,
right,
that it's difficult for people to afford college now.
Right.
I mean, when I was a student at Murray State, it was, I believe, if I remember correctly, $30 a credit hour. So I was looking at $360 for 12 hours for a semester.
Right.
A semester now at Murray State is $3,700, $3,800.
Yeah.
It's gone up by more than a factor of 10.
Yeah.
And the result is that if you go to college, for most people, you either can't afford to go or you go, but you have to borrow
Right.
an enormous sum of money.
And you owe the money at a profit to the federal government.
Yes, the federal government makes a profit on the loans.
That's something that just disturbs me.
I agree. It's that,
Why?
and
You know?
it's mind-boggling.
I think I take it one step further as well. When I first got into college, I was paying $111 a credit hour, which was still reasonable compared to today.
Yes.
But you can't have a university that is cutting edge on so much of their stuff, that is taking pains to be encompassing of all the modern educational materials out there from every field. The governor's talked about STEM, right? The sciences and mathematics. Think about what you're asking for these colleges to be able to do. Oh, by the way, we need you to have the cutting edge information in all science and mathematics. But by the way, we're going to cut our budget to you. We're not going to pay as much as we have. We're just not going to do it. Deal with 50% less. The next year comes along, oh, by the way, deal with 50% less. Oh, by the way, deal with less. We still want you to do this. The cost of this information is higher. The difficulties in holding on and retaining qualified professors in these fields is higher. But by the way, do it with less money.
And they're also, I saw the other day, I think a bill had been filed to take the first step toward using public money for private schools in the state of Kentucky. They're going to funnel money intended for Callaway County High School, Murray High, the elementary schools around here. They're going to take that money and
give it to
funnel
Community
some
Christian.
of it,
Give it to, yeah.
yes, to Christian Fellowship, Community Christian,
St.
to
Mary's.
St. Mary's, schools like that.
Yeah. I have a real problem with that.
I do too.
Everybody talks about their religion. Oh no, we want religion taught in schools.
But a lot of these won't be religious schools. They'll
be profit centers.
yes.
Some corporation's going to make a profit off of educating your kids.
Yes.
But that's okay, because their businesses are often known for putting profit secondary to the goods of their consumers. All businesses do that, right? I mean, the tobacco industry was great about that, wasn't it? They would love it. No. Don't smoke. It's bad for you. This is the whole problem that I've got with this situation, is that we do all these things as if they're not going to have repercussions. We're just going to go through, oh, no, we'll cut education. It'll be okay. No, we'll move education money so that people can make a profit off the education, because they're going to do better with the money, when there's no indication that that's ever been true. Ever. All the things that Betsy DeVos has put forth in her career as a advocate for education, because she's not even a professional educator, they failed.
Well,
They failed. She has no success, none whatsoever. But what can you expect when you elect a guy who's declared bankruptcy more than he's had marriages, which is difficult for him?
very true. Yeah, it's and of course what you get with the private charter schools that Betsy DeVos ran and that she supports, some of them will be great. There's no doubt about that. Some of them truly will be great. Others will be horrible. That's just true. And you've had circumstances where the charter schools would close during the middle of the year and file bankruptcy. And then the school system's left with an influx of kids that were going to the charter school that they can't go
fund.
there anymore.
Yeah. They got no funding because the funding's already been paid.
Yeah.
Those charter schools already cashed those checks.
Right.
They do that right before they declare
They
bankruptcy.
cash the checks, and they paid their corporate officers, and then they said, "Oh well, we don't have enough. Sorry, we're closing."
We gotta just shut it down. You guys don't worry about it. You'll just head to the public schools. It'll be okay. They'll take care of you.
Oh,
Again, it's this delusion that somehow a business model is better for people than a nonprofit model, and there's nothing that backs that up.
no, nothing at all. Got anything else?
So much, but we just don't have time.
No. That brings to a close this edition of the Improbability Engine.
The world's about to be destroyed. There's no point getting all annoyed. Lie back and let the planet dissolve around. Despite those next to defeats, we thought that most of you were sweet.